Dear students of class 10A and 10B, welcome to my history class. Today's lesson is the same, the United Nations. As per the following points, I am going to teach you this lesson. Point number 1, advisory opinions. Second, codification of international law. Third, evolving procedures for peaceful settlement of disputes, the Economic and Social Council, the Trusteeship Council, and the Secretariat. First, advisory opinions. Advisory opinions. You know, the advisory opinions of the International Court of Justice is for only the international organizations. That is, only the international organizations of the United Nations can apply for the advisory opinions of the International Court of Justice. The opinions of the court are five organs of the United Nations. That means the only bodies at present recommend for the advisory opinions of the International Court of Justice. These bodies are the bodies of five organs of the United Nations and 16 specialized agencies of the United Nations family. That means the bodies which are formed with five organs of the United Nations and 16 specialized agencies of the United Nations, they apply for the advisory opinions of the International Court of Justice on behalf of the international organizations of the United Nations. In the year 1946, the court has given, since 1947, the International Court of Justice, since the year 1946, the International Court of Justice has given 26 advisory opinions. And now why did they give advisory opinions? In which cases they gave advisory opinions? Reparation for injuries suffered in the service of the United Nations, territorial status of Southwest Africa, means Namibia, and Western Sahara. In these cases, the International Court of Justice has given 24 advisory opinions. The next point, codification of international law. Before giving verdict, the International Court of Justice International Court of Justice generally goes through the laws of international judicial procedure as to how they would give it. Besides, it examines international, conventions. It examines international customs and traditions, judicial decisions, and general principles of law in the process of this codification of international law. Before giving any verdict, the International Court of Justice always examines various kinds of judicial procedures, and in order to make it sure what decisions they are going to take, their final decision. That's why before giving their verdicts, the International Court of Justice always examines international conventions, international laws, customs, judicial decisions, and then it gives its verdict. That's why codification of international law is a very important part for the International Court of Justice. The next point, evolving procedures. What is evolving procedures? The court, the International Court of Justice may recommend appropriate procedures or methods of settlement during or at the end of the case. That means during the process of judgment or at the end of the process of judgment, the International Court of Justice can recommend appropriate procedures or methods of settlement. It may also recommend terms of settlement. Why? Because of huge working load. In order to reduce its working load, the Supreme Court, the International Court of Justice can send a court to another judges. There are 15 judges of the International Court of Justice. In order to, reduce working load, they generally distributes their, assignments. They distributes their works among themselves, so that the procedure of judgment could become easier. That's why the terms of settlement, furthermore, it may also recommend terms of settlement. And while taking this decision, the terms of settlement, what type of settlement would be done, they generally communicate it. And next one, the decision of the court. The decision of the International Court of Justice, means the decision of the International Court of Justice is made by whom? Is made by the majority of the judges present in the court. So the decision of the International Court of Justice is made by all the judges of the International Court of Justice. That means each and every case is thoroughly discussed with each other. As I mentioned earlier, each and every judge consults each other before giving verdict. That's why the process of judgment in the International Court of Justice takes time. The process is time consuming. Why? Because of thorough discussion and international codification of law. Besides, the procedure of settlement in consultation with other judges, it takes time to take decision. And next one, the decision of the court is made by the majority of the judges present, as I mentioned. And at the same time, it is also important to mention, if any party fails to comply and fulfill its obligation, the other party may take up the matter in the Security Council. Suppose one party means one member of the international, member state of the United Nations. Suppose one member state of the United Nations fails to comply and fulfill its obligation. In that case, other member state may take up the case and can go to the Security Council for further procedure of judgment, so that the International Court of Justice can take up the case and once again can review the judicial procedure once again. Then next point, my dear students, evolving procedure for peaceful settlements and disputes. Each and every member states of a member state of the United Nations has right to apply for solving for the settlement of any international crisis and problems to the International Court of Justice. That's why the International Court of Justice, thoroughly. International Court of Justice discusses all the matters in consultation with other judges and then takes decision regarding the procedure of international codification of law, and then they take decision, and finally the International Court of Justice tries to solve the problems, tries to solve the international law, international crisis, international problems and disputes, and ultimately the problems and disputes are settled under the special care of the International Court of Justice. And next point, the Economic and Social Council. The Economic and Social Council. Another important organ of the United Nations is the Economic and Social Council, in short, ECOSOC, the Economic and Social Council. The Economic and Social Council, it is responsible for promoting the international, another important organ of the United Nations organization is the Economic and Social Council. It is responsible for promoting higher standards for living, full employment, and economic and social progress. In order to ensure economic progress, in order to ensure services for all, jobs for all, in order to ensure higher standards of living, the economic and social progress, this council works steadily for the all-round development of the world people, all-round development of the world. That's why this organ, the Economic and Social Council, works steadily. The next point, the Trusteeship Council. Trusteeship Council. It is in charge of all territories which were administered before the Second World War and under the mandate system of the League of Nations. Before, the Second World War, the League of Nations also was there. So, those territories which were whose political crises were not solved. That means the United Nations organization could not solve their political disputes, could not settle their political disputes, and still they are suffering before Second World War. The Trusteeship Council takes responsibilities of these, of these states. These states means these neighboring states or these states of the United Nations, and tries to solve their territorial problems, tries to solve the international crisis, international problems of these states. So those states, those member states of the United Nations, appeal to the Trusteeship Council regarding their territorial crisis, territorial problem, regarding controversial issues of their territories. They may appeal to the Trusteeship Council, and Trusteeship Council solve their problems, provided the matter should be related to the matter of the League of Nations before the Second World War. That means, as I mentioned earlier, before Second World War, the League of Nations, was established. The League of Nations established, but it failed to achieve success. It failed to solve some problems of its member states. The member states, they did not get themselves involved in the programs and procedure of the League of Nations. On the contrary, they were trying to solve their problems by themselves, without caring of the existence of the League of Nations. So these problems of the nation states of the United Nations, these problems, whenever the states would like to get it solved through the through the International Court of Justice, then in that case, before going to make an appeal for the International Court of Justice, they can apply to the Trusteeship Council. Trusteeship Council is there in order to settle their disputes. Their disputes must be a dispute of territories. In that case, the territorial dispute, in order to solve the territorial disputes, the Trusteeship Council takes up their cases and tries to solve their problems. Now the Secretariat, last point, the Secretariat, it is the chief administrative office. The Secretariat is the chief administrative office of the United Nations, and it is composed of the Secretary General. The chief administrative office of the United Nations is the Secretariat. Which one is the chief administrative office of the United Nations? The Secretariat. The Secretariat is the chief administrative office of the United Nations, and it has one Secretary General. This Secretary General is appointed by the General Assembly in consultation with the Security Council. And besides, the chief administrative officer of the organization and an international staff appointed by him, by the Secretary General. Why? In order to reduce his working load. In order to reduce his working load, the Secretary General of the United Nations, appoints one administrative officer and one international staff. Its main function is to coordinate and supervise the activities of the UN organ, these two officers, administrative officer and international staff, their main work, their main function is to coordinate and supervise the activities of the United Nations organ, and reduce the working load of the Secretary General of the United Nations organization. Up to this, my dear students, thank you.